Well, good evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson tonight. Kathy Griffin has just been bounced at CNN after apologizing for her gruesome Donald Trump beheading video. In a minute, we'll ask whatever happened to comedy and why it's suddenly been replaced by preachy political sermonizing from dumb people, a real concern. But first tonight, Hillary Clinton appears to be making a fashion statement by adopting the left's trendiest new accessory, a tinfoil hat. While taking questions at a tech conference in California today, Clinton dismissed the scandal over her private email server as a non-issue of zero importance.
My email account was turned into, the biggest scandal since Lord knows when. This was the biggest nothing burger ever. It was a mistake. I've said it was a mistake. And obviously, if I got to turn the clock back, I wouldn't have done it in the first place. But the way that it was used was very damaging.
It meant nothing. It was totally irrelevant, which does raise the question, if it didn't mean anything, why did it hurt her campaign so much? She had an explanation for that, too. She said because the right-wingers in the media, the Washington Post and the New York Times, wouldn't let it go.
I know you had Dean Baquet here from the New York Times yesterday, and they covered it like it was Pearl Harbor. And then in their endorsement of me, they said, this email thing, it's like a help desk issue. So it was always a hard issue to put to bed, but we put it to bed in July, and then it rose up again.
Okay, so the New York Times is biased against Democrats. A novel defense, you say? Oh, but it got weirder from there, a lot weirder. Hillary went on to deliver a narrative so complex we could barely follow it, but we did. She explained how Donald Trump and Russia teamed up to rob her of her rightful job as President of the United States.
How did they know what messages to deliver? Who told them? Who told them?
Yeah.
Who were they coordinating with or colluding with? There's all these stories about, guys over in Macedonia who are running these fake news sites. The Russians, in my opinion, and based on the intel and counter-intel people I've talked to, could not have known how best to weaponize that information unless they had been guided. And here's
guided by Americans.
Guided by Americans. Within 1 hour of the Access Hollywood tapes being leaked, within 1 hour, the Russians, let's say WikiLeaks, same thing, dumped the John Podesta emails.
Oh, the Russians, but not just the Russians, the guys in Macedonia. So here's what Hillary Clinton is asking you to believe. Her campaign had no message or economic agenda, or really any idea what voters wanted in the last election. But that didn't matter, none of it. They were going to win anyway. It was guaranteed by God himself. Then, at the last minute, the Trump campaign, which had half the money Hillary had, almost no staff or institutional support from anybody, came up with the diabolical idea to reach out directly to the government of Vladimir Putin and his army of bloggers and hackers and request emergency help. Putin complied, of course, because Trump was his puppet, perhaps even a secret agent of the Kremlin working directly for him. What happened next is history, or as Hillary herself might put it, her story. Unnamed members of Trump's campaign asked Russia to hack the DNC and the personal Gmail account of Clinton's campaign chairman, John Podesta, having deduced this must be the best way to hurt her in the campaign. The emails they exposed found a cushy relationship between the media and the Democratic Party. They showed evidence the Democratic primary process was rigged in Clinton's favor. They exposed Wall Street speech transcripts Clinton wanted to keep secret. The Trump people imagined all of this would be enough to win, but not so. In fact, Hillary explained today the emails the Russian hacked were boring and contained nothing of note, nothing worth knowing. So to increase the potency of this scheme, the Trump campaign ordered Russia to manufacture something called fake news out of the emails and distribute them through their network of bogus news outlets, which, by the way, they have. You probably didn't know that. Now researchers at Stanford have actually discovered that the fake news Hillary refers to was seen by almost nobody and believed by even fewer people. But according to Hillary, it was enough in the end to bamboozle the sad and easily confused voters of Pennsylvania and Wisconsin into mistakenly voting for Donald Trump. And by the way, she feels sorry for them for doing that. According to Hillary, the Trump campaign was so intimately tied to the vast Russian propaganda apparatus that they dictated the release of John Podesta's emails down to the minute in order to achieve maximum effect. They were apparently successful in this, even though, according to Hillary, nothing bad was in the emails in the first place, and they should have had no effect at all. Is that diabolical enough for you? Now, keep in mind that Hillary confidently asserted all of this today while providing precisely no evidence that any of it ever happened. A conspiracy so vast, she doesn't need to prove it. Now, no matter how much you may dislike Hillary Clinton, and some of you may, it was a poignant performance to watch. You almost wanted to help her. Mark Stein is a writer, a columnist, and a regular sub for Rush Limbaugh on the radio, and he joins us tonight. Did you have the same reaction I did, which is, boy, this is making me uncomfortable. I feel sorry for this person.
Well, that was my first reaction. My second reaction, Tucker, was to say, if I ever run for president, I want these same Macedonian campaign consultants who are the geniuses. That's who the Russians go to when they want to really sew up a presidential campaign.
That's too good. Have you noticed? Now, we're making fun of Hillary Clinton, and actually my sympathy for her is sincere because I thought this was deranged, what she said today. But she's not the first. She's the third Democratic presidential candidate in a row to lose and still make the case, I didn't actually lose. Kerry made that case. Gore made that case. Do you see a theme here?
Well, in fairness, Al Gore and John Kerry lost to conventional candidates. What Donald Trump did was unprecedented. He'd never been elected to the school board. He had no ground game. He spent less money than anybody since Chester Arthur. He veered erratically off message, so sometimes he'd be talking about Make America Great Again, and 10 minutes later he'd be going on about how Macy's stock has tanked since they stopped carrying Trump ties, and yet somehow he manages to beat the most qualified candidate ever to run for the presidency of the United States. And the Democrats and the candidate herself just can't accept that this happened. And in a sense, they're right. If it was a military campaign, they'd be teaching it at staff colleges across the world for the next 2 centuries.
Well, I
it's
think
remarkable.
That's a fair point. No, you're making a great point. I mean, this is a pretty conventional defense mechanism, psychological reaction to it. I wish it weren't dragging our foreign policy down along with it, though.
No, and I think that's true. I mean, if you were Putin at this stage, let's say that Trump is a Russian agent. If you were Putin, you'd have to think you'd actually got a twofer, because right now Hillary is telling the American people whatever happens, the Russians are behind it. That's how cunning they are. That's how their power is so all-pervasive. Later in that bizarre performance, she starts going on about how Cambridge Analytica, this data mining group, apparently insisted in return for providing Trump with data that he hire Kellyanne Conway and Steve Bannon. So as Hillary sees it, Kellyanne Conway is some kind of Soviet honey trap who's at the heart of this of this campaign. I don't even understand that, because Cambridge Analytica, as I understand it, was set up by some British company. So the plot thickens, because now we've got rogue double agents from MI6, probably Kim Philby, if you remember.
And Anthony Blunt.
Cold War day. I mean, but that's the thing. And what you have to ask is, who's behind the Russians? Well, it's this Cambridge Analytica. So it's the British behind the but who's behind the British? Well, it's the Macedonians. They're behind everything.
But I guess what's so ludicrous about this is they're blaming the Trump campaign's collusion with Russia. Now, the Russians, whatever their skills, can't build a reliable escalator. I don't think they could pull this off. And the Trump campaign was pure message. That's all they had. They had no money. They were disorganized deeply in a lot of ways. There's no way they could have. I mean, if you know anything about how it actually happened, this is insane.
Well, the fantastic thing about the Trump campaign, if you forgive me coming the unassimilated foreigner on you, Tucker, but presidential politics, the conventions had gotten so hopelessly boring. And Hillary ran an utterly conventional campaign. She paid talentless, mediocre people large sums of money to do the same things they've done for every other candidate. And Trump just comes along, he's bored stiff by all that, and he says he just does it his way and blows all those stupid conventions out of the water. And the Republicans hated him for doing that, and the Democrats still can't actually believe he did it.
Mark Stein, you are single-handedly making me pro-immigration, at least in your case. Thank you for joining us tonight.
More Macedonian immigrants, Tucker. That's what we need.
They're already here. Oh! Thanks, Mark. Kathy Griffin's ISIS-style beheading of Trump was offensive, obviously, but even worse, maybe, it was totally unfunny. Up next, we'll ask a comedian why politics appear to be ruining comedy. Also, President Trump just coined a new phrase, kafif, or kafif. How do you pronounce it? What is it? What's behind the reaction to it? All of that in the day's weirdest story. Stay tuned. Kathy Griffin got canned by CNN this afternoon, a day after she posted a picture of herself posing ISIS-style with Donald Trump's bloody, severed head. The image itself was appalling, violent, creepy, weird. But it was also, and this may be the main problem, totally unfunny. Kathy Griffin bills herself as a comedian, but this was not comedy. It was a political stunt of the dumbest kind. Your 8th grader wouldn't do it. It was too stupid. And it wasn't a departure for Griffin. She hasn't been funny in years, assuming she ever was. People clap for her not because they're amused, but because they agree with her politics. That's not art. It's affirmation. But an awful lot of comedy is like that all of a sudden. Ever watch Samantha Bee? If you like preachy self-righteousness in massive doses, that's the show for you. Or try John Oliver. You get the same thing there. Or Bill Maher. Or Trevor Noah. Or Stephen Colbert. Some of these guys used to be funny a long time ago. They're not Samantha Bee. She was never funny. Now they're just playing to the biases and the vanities of their audience. And it's working, unfortunately, which means they're all exactly the same. Prisoners of conformity, which is always the sworn enemy of art. Step out of line and you pay the price, as Dave Chappelle, who is a genius, learned when he returned from retirement not long ago and dared to gore a sacred cow or two. That used to be what comedians did, and we were grateful to hear someone tell the truth. Now they're booed off the stage for even daring to do that. Humor is dead. Politics killed it. Ben Kissel is a comedian. He joins us to mourn. Now, Ben, I know we're not on the same side politically. I doubt any comedian agrees with my politics, but I think you'll agree that Kathy Griffin is just not funny. And I know a lot of people who work in comedy. I don't know one person who thinks Kathy Griffin is talented. She's not, and yet she's hung on all these years because she's a political activist. And that's enough, and it shouldn't be enough.
Yeah, I mean, I am not the core demographic for Kathy Griffin. Her fan base enjoys her, and there's something to be said about that. I think there might be a bit of a misnomer because she is a comedian. It doesn't necessarily mean, however, that all of her actions, all of her moments of satire are meant to solicit laughter. I think she was attempting to make a political point that obviously has angered a lot on the right, and certainly even some on the left. But I think we do have to address the issue of political correctness and how it has gone completely bonkers in this country. And the right for the longest time called the left snowflakes. But where I'm sitting, it's cold in here, and the snow is falling not from the left, but from the right.
Well, let me just be totally clear. I'm never going to call for anybody's firing for saying something stupid on television as someone who said stupid things on television. I'm against the mob forcing anyone from a job. And it happens all the time, and I'm not into it. But let's just be totally real about Kathy Griffin. She's totally mediocre. Like, it's not, when you say, well, just because she's a comedian doesn't mean she has to be funny. If you say you're a surgeon, you got to be able to take my appendix out, or you're not really a surgeon. Well, there should be a bar for, being funny, and she doesn't meet it.
You know, I'm not going to go into if she's funny or not. It's a very subjective thing. I do just want to focus on her First Amendment rights to, for this satire. It should exist, or she has the First Amendment right to do so, the same way that Ted Nugent had a First Amendment right to shoot an effigy of Barack Obama in 2012, the same way that that rodeo clown who was fired from the rodeo for putting on a Barack Obama mask had the right to his own form of satire as well.
The First Amendment, which I support vehemently, doesn't mean anything if you can't exercise it. And comedians feel that they have to toe a certain line, and you know because you're in this business, they are not free to deviate from the received wisdom on anything. Conformity is enforced. Well, and that is, you can't create art in that environment.
I'm not exactly sure if that's true. I mean, obviously, Kathy Griffin has learned when you do put yourself out there, there will be a blowback. And again, that is well within the individual's rights to have the blowback of her actions. Of course, she can also do those actions. I mean, I think we have to look at it as a whole. You know, the right for the longest time has been demonized in the left for being politically correct. This is an opportunity for the right to stand up and say, hey, you know what? I'm not for this. I think this is abhorrent, but she has a right to do it.
Well, but
I mean, Ted Nugent, for crying out loud.
I know. Okay, hold on. I'm trying to talk to you about art, though, which is more meaningful, I think, than politics because it pertains to human expression and what people really care about and what they really believe. I'll give you an example, and it is political, but it's the perfect example. The kid who gave the speech or the supposed comedy deal at the White House Correspondents' Dinner was, totally mediocre. And he was there because he hates Trump. Here's a clip from him. Watch this.
Donald Trump doesn't care about free speech. The man who tweets everything that enters his head refuses to acknowledge the amendment that allows him to do it. Think about it. It's almost, what is it, 11? It's 11 p.m. right now. In 4 hours, Donald Trump will be tweeting about how bad Nicki Minaj bombed at this dinner. And he'll be doing it completely sober. And that's his right. And I'm proud that all of us are here tonight to defend that right, even if the man in the White House never would.
Oh, God. Stop with the preaching. Does anybody ever stop with the preaching? I mean, seriously.
I could go for less preaching. There is no denying that. But just again, just to hammer home the point, it was her right. Ted Nugent was just recently in the Oval Office with Donald Trump.
Whatever.
And Donald Trump did. He is fortunate because this has been a distraction.
But I want someone to tell the
controversies.
truth, don't you? So when Dave Chappelle, everyone acknowledges Dave Chappelle's a really talented guy, and he comes back, and he doesn't know the rules have changed, and he tells jokes about transgenders or whatever, and all of a sudden he's like attacked by everyone because that's not allowed. Some things are off limits. How can comedians allow anything to be off limits? I thought that was the whole point. You were brave enough to tell the whole truth, but you're not. You're cowards.
I completely agree with you. Comedians should be able to push the envelope, cross the line. That's exactly what Kathy Griffin did here. It's cost her monetarily. She lost Squatty Potty and the CNN
She didn't cross
New
the
York,
line. She was
New York
playing for
Eve,
her friends,
New Year's
all
Eve
her
event.
sanctimonious friends. It was like the 9 people in her world were like, "Go, Kathy, that's so brave." But it's not. It doesn't tell a deeper truth about anything. It's like crap.
Well, this again is this is an opportunity for the right to stand up for the First Amendment
Yeah,
and
well, we
don't
do
be
it every
politically
night on this
correct and
show.
allow people to do this. And you're allowed to protest Kathy Griffin all you want.
I'm sorry, Ben, that they got you captive over there. Great to see you tonight.
Thank you, Tucker.
Well, Kathy Griffin's beheading photo op was big news yesterday that you wouldn't have been able to tell by watching CNN. Joe Concha does watch CNN for a living. He writes about media for The Hill, and he joins us right now. So, Joe, this was a big story, but not over there?
It wasn't covered as much, nearly, of course not. This was embarrassing for CNN. Granted, she's only on there once a year, but still, that is an employee that they were paying to do the New Year's Eve special with Anderson Cooper. But give Kathy Griffin, I'm going to give her some credit here, Tucker, because she is the first person in years to bring the left and the right together in denouncing one issue. When you could have Keith Olbermann, Chelsea Clinton, Mitt Romney, and Donald Trump all saying that photo's bad, you know, we're really onto something here.
Well, that's but CNN wasn't part of that. They were sort of standing alone here, and that's because it wasn't news, or no one was talking about it, or were there other reasons why they didn't want to get into it?
No. Look, it was the top trending story all day yesterday.
Oh.
I thought that they would come out after you saw this photo and immediately say she's not part of our New Year's Eve coverage anymore. And it took them about a full day, but they eventually did get to taking her off that coverage. And look, we're at a point now where Kathy Griffin has an endorsement with Squatty Potty, a great American company. I have 3 of them, Tucker. Very catchy slogan, stools for better stools. And they, yesterday, about 5 minutes after that photo came out, said, we are denouncing Kathy Griffin. We're ending our relationship. It took CNN about another day before they were able to do the same. So that's where we're at now, where Squatty Potty is being more decisive than a cable news network that's been in existence for 40 years.
Right, so, like, the toilet company has higher standards than the news channel? Is that what you're saying?
Well,
I don't want to put words in your mouth now.
No, let's move on.
So what exactly does this mean? And as a factual matter, was she employed by the channel? Was she, coming in every year? Were they paying her for that? And how long had she been doing the New Year's thing?
Oh, I would think she was absolutely compensated. She's been doing the New Year's Eve thing since 2007 with anchor Anderson Cooper from Times Square. It's a very highly rated special that they do every year, mainly because they got 2 things out of it. They got ratings because she did a provocative thing probably, or said a provocative thing, and they got virality because the clips kept moving on and on. So that's probably what delayed CNN's decision here. But look, social media is the great equalizer now in 2017, Tucker. CNN, I think, thought at first probably maybe this will blow over by December when they announce she's coming back. But if that happened, you would have boycotts, which I know you don't like, of advertisers. Yeah. You would have a PR nightmare, and you would have people screaming about this, because that is an image. Take Trump and Griffin out of it. That is an image of an American citizen holding up a beheaded head of a sitting president, mimicking our greatest enemy, you could argue, in ISIS. And that's something that's etched in people's memories that they would not forget. This is her legacy now, unfortunately.
Yeah, I mean, she was horrible before, just pandering to the elites and their stupid, closed-minded attitudes. So I turned into that channel yesterday to see, you know, are they covering this, and what are they covering? Because it's kind of interesting to see their alternative reality. And this is what I saw. Watch.
Being president is not agreeing with the president. He complained that his first trip overseas was going to be too long, that he wasn't looking forward to it, and he returned to the White House angry. He's gained weight, according to these sources. He doesn't trust people around him. He's withdrawing. Not a good picture. It's the one being painted by those sources.
I actually like the anchor over there who just said that, but that line, I really had to put it in my refrigerator. He's gained weight, according to sources.
According to sources. You know what the #1 complaint of the New York Times readers are? This is according to their public editors year after year. The overuse of unnamed sources. If I'm a reader just sitting at home, I'm wondering, okay, who has the motivation and the agenda to go on the record with CNN, who Trump, he hasn't appeared on that network since August of 2016. What friend of Trump is running to CNN to talk about how much of a bad mood he's in and how much weight he's gained? And what is the credibility of this source in the first place? Motive, agenda, credibility. And here's the problem, Tucker. After that story comes out, then everybody else in media picks up the story as gospel because they believe the source, who we don't know who it is and what their agenda is. And that's the whole problem with all of these bombshells that we've seen for the first 120 days of this presidency.
Well, unless it's his personal physician, I think you would have to say nobody knows what he weighs. I mean, like, what is that? It's insane. Joe, thank you for joining us and for watching all that stuff for us. Well, a pastor says President Trump's new budget is not simply bad policy, it's a plot to systematically destroy the country's poor and non-white populations. He'll be here to explain that theory in more detail. Well, Bishop Dwayne Royster is a political activist and a self-described social change agent and agitator. At a recent rally in Washington, D.C., he said that President Trump's recently released budget proposal is a plot for, quote, ethnic cleansing. Watch.
This budget, if I can be honest with you, it is an attempt to implement ethnic cleansing in this nation from people of color, but also poor white folk from whom the services being cut will be impacted the most. President Trump and his surrogates have used dog whistle language to speak about race in negative ways and create fear in the hearts of Americans. Here is the reality. Many poor black families and brown families and Asian families and indigenous families will be devastated by this budget. So we say to Donald Trump, hands off our families, hands off our health care, hands off this budget, hands off this nation, hands off.
Bishop Royster joins us in the studio. Bishop, thanks for coming on.
Tucker, thanks for having me on today.
I was really offended that you said that, and here's why.
Sure.
You know, you could disagree with the policies. I may disagree with the policies.
Sure.
But you were claiming you knew the motive when you don't. You're using your office, which is as a clergyman, that commands respect by definition,
sure,
to scare the hell out of people on the basis of something you don't know is true. And that's the definition of demagoguery.
So, Tucker, thanks for having me on. I appreciate the opportunity to come in here and share and talk about what happened there. I think what we found in this particular budget that Donald Trump is presenting to America is offensive. I find that the budget that he has presented to us, to the American people, to be absolutely abysmal. I find the budget that he presented to America to be an absolute sin. You know, the judgment of a nation is not based on its military might. It's not based on how well it did its borders. It's based on how it took care of its least, the last, the lost, the struggling. And based on the budget that Donald Trump just presented to us just last week, he has basically had contempt for people of color. He has had contempt for people who are poor. He has had contempt for people who struggle deeply. He has had contempt for anybody that doesn't look like him.
You know, I don't want to be in the position of defending a budget that I don't like in a lot of ways. But it's outrageous for you to say he has contempt when you don't know that. You don't know that. It's unknowable. We can evaluate whether the policies work or not, whether we agree with them or not. We can't evaluate what he thinks because we don't know. And you cast this in racial terms.
It is racial.
How is it racial?
It's absolutely racial.
Doesn't this affect poor white people, too?
Absolutely.
Then how's it racial?
Tucker, if we were to go back and take a look at Donald Trump as candidate up through all the actions Donald Trump has made in the beginning of his presidency, the actions that he has taken are very much racially motivated. They're very much motivated by faith. They're very much motivated by trying to make America white again, not just make America great again.
How the hell do you look at this budget and say it's ethnic cleansing?
It is ethnic cleansing.
People believe you.
It is. We're talking
you call
about
yourself a minister.
We're talking about taking $1.4 trillion out of Medicaid, making it so that people who struggle the deepest in this country are not going to be able to get the health care that they need. We're talking about taking $200 billion. Let me finish. They're talking about taking $200 billion away from SNAP benefits that are going to be able to help feed people in this country. We're talking about taking away more money.
Hold on, slow down. I'm asking something very specific. Why is it ethnic? Because the life expectancy for black Americans is not in decline. It is in decline for working class white Americans. So presumably it hurts them worse.
But that number is still higher for white folk than it is for black folk in this country. No, the reality is that this is racial. The dog whistle language that Donald Trump and his surrogates used while they were on the campaign trail is the same language that they're using to try to get this budget passed. It's the same language that they're trying to use to be able to try to cut these programs. They're using dog whistle language that goes back to Nixon and when he was using the Southern strategy, when Ronald Reagan was using that language. This is a fact-based conversation. When we look at the programs that are being cut, they are going to cut people of color. They're going to cut poor white people, and the poor white folk out there are being sold a bill of lies that this budget is going to help them. It's not going to help them. You're trying to
overwhelm me with the force of your voice. I want to throw some numbers at you. Under the 8 years of the Obama administration, the black labor force participation rate dropped more than 2%. Black home ownership down 9%.
Sure.
Black Americans below the poverty line up 1.5%. Real median income for black families down 1.5%, et cetera, et cetera. Gun deaths up. Number of black executives dropped 50%, et cetera, et cetera. So you could look at that data set and say that's ethnic cleansing. That would be insane.
No, first of all, the reason that most of those things happened had nothing to do with Barack Obama's leadership. It had to do with what happened the final year of George Bush's leadership when we began to fall into a recession. And that's when we began to see black wealth.
Can I ask you something?
When we began to see
I know where this argument's going to go.
That's where we're going to go.
Okay, you'll defend anything. You're standing in front of an abortion sign in a clerical collar, so you'll defend anything.
Let me tell you where I'm at right now.
Let me ask you a question. Will you stop saying things that are irresponsible, like the term ethnic cleansing, because you're scaring the hell out of people and making it impossible to have a rational conversation? Will you please stop doing that?
No, I'm absolutely not, because I'm not going to do it until we get an absolutely reasonable budget that is not targeting people who suffer the deepest in this country.
But why not argue against the budget?
And not creating a budget that puts profits over people and that really builds itself off the misery of dark-skinned bodies in this country. But why don't you say specific,
rather than getting to motive and other unknowable things, why don't you say, look, if the SNAP program, for example, which you support, and I think it's fair to say we shouldn't cut this, and here's why. Instead of making gross generalizations about people's ethnicity and skin color and evoking the shared memories of persecution, which you are doing on purpose, say, look, here's the policy.
People. This is persecuting people.
Maybe he just disagrees with you. Does that make him evil?
In this country will be persecuted as a result of this. We're cutting the legal services corporation so people won't even be able to have a legal defense for themselves in this country.
You're so overstating it that here's the problem. Here's why I think you're a bad representative for your faith. Because you don't entertain...
You don't know anything about my faith.
I'm saying this, that a prerequisite of decency is to assume, until proved otherwise, goodwill on the part of people who disagree. The people who are reasonable and decent can have a different view from the view I have, and they're still reasonable and decent. We just disagree. You don't seem to entertain that possibility.
Actually, Tucker, I did not attack Donald Trump personally. I attacked this policy.
Ethnic cleansing?
And I said this particular policy is about ethnic cleansing, along with the Muslim ban, along with what he did at Standing Rock with executive orders, letting oil pipelines come through indigenous communities that the white communities in the same area didn't want coming through their areas. While we look at this budget, everything else that's going on with that.
There are plenty of Indian reservations that have pipelines through them. Are they complicit in ethnic cleansing? Like, how much do you know about this stuff?
If there are indigenous, I was in Standing Rock, so if there are indigenous folk that are saying we don't want this coming through our land because we're concerned about it poisoning our water, then they have every right to do that, and the federal government has a obligation to listen to them and not break treaties.
I think that's a fair point. But what it doesn't mean, and what you need to at least admit it doesn't mean, is that anyone who disagrees is against Indians.
Look, Tucker,
it doesn't mean that. It's not the same as racism to disagree with someone. I'm sorry.
Let me just be plain with you. Right?
I hope you will.
You know what? I'm reminded of John F. Kennedy, Ronald Reagan, Barack Obama talked about America being a city on a hill. And I heard Martin Luther King talk about the beloved community. And he talked about a beloved community where we battled against racism and militarism and materialism, and we created a community where people didn't see diversity as something that's evil, but instead something to be celebrated, something that we could learn from one another, something that we could use to build one another.
Get to the point here, okay?
My point is that this budget goes contrary to the beloved community. This budget goes against being the city on the hill.
But you're making another silly generalization. Look,
no,
this is an adult world with hard decisions about specific facts, and you don't have any specific facts.
If you made $30,000 a year and you had a family of 4 and you were trying to survive out there, and all of a sudden you discovered that your medical assistance and your food stamps are getting ready to get cut, how is that going to make you feel?
I think that's a totally fair point. What is unfair is to call anyone who disagrees with you a racist, which is what you're doing. And it makes
I said
reasonable...
it's about ethnic cleansing, yes.
Okay. That makes
I don't
reasonable...
apologize for that. I will not
you ought
apologize
to.
for that. No, I'm
and
not
it's clearly your
gonna apologize
policy
for
not
that.
to apologize because you don't want to show weakness.
No,
but out of
has to do with
decency,
being a prophetic
you ought to
voice in
be...
this nation to call
It's
out
not
truth.
prophetic, it's
It is
irresponsible.
prophetic. It absolutely
and you
is.
ought to bring people together in your capacity as a clergyman, not divide them. Don't lift the Bible in my presence,
I'm a preacher. This is what I do,
No,
right?
not here.
This is what I do. Matthew 25, Jesus talks very clearly about...
You know what? I want to have a
Jesus talks very
conversation
clearly about
adult
judging
things.
how people are going to be judged. Are you saying faith is not an adult thing? Are you sitting here criticizing faith and saying it's not an adult
needless
thing?
to say,
You, sir, ought to be ashamed
all right, we got to go.
for doing that.
All right, I'm not attacking faith. Well, the Center for Medical Progress has another video exposing the shocking attitudes in the abortion industry, an industry that is defended by some in the clergy, amazingly. Now a California judge is ordering them to suppress the tape. Anti-abortion campaigner Lila Rose will be here to talk about it next. Well, the Center for Medical Progress is back. The pro-life group just released another undercover video which shows attendees at the National Abortion Federation convention sharing their frank thoughts about abortion. And it's not like the rhetoric you hear in public. It's raw, and it's what they really think. At one point, a Planned Parenthood employee says, quote, "The fetus is a tough little object, and taking it apart, I mean taking it apart on day one, is very difficult." Elsewhere, a member of the consortium of abortion providers says this: "An eyeball just fell down into my lap, and that is gross." And the comment gets laughter from her audience. That's how grotesque it is. And we'd love to show you the video, but we can't because of a man called William Orrick. He's a federal district judge. He's a massive contributor to Democrats, and he's ordered the video be suppressed, saying, in effect, the First Amendment doesn't exist. And the video somehow violates a gag order he placed on the Center for Medical Progress in 2015. It's an atrocity. It's gotten very little attention, and we are proud to bring it to you tonight and bring you Lila Rose. She's the founder and president of Live Action, the anti-abortion group. So, Lila, thanks for joining us. Is the allegation that, I mean, the only way, it seems to me, that would be legitimate that you could keep something under wraps like this video is if you could show that they're not real. And so is there any evidence that these videos are not real?
Well, I think precisely because they are real is why there's so much opposition. I mean, this is National Abortion Federation and Planned Parenthood's own trade show. This is where they get together and they talk about what they do every day. Planned Parenthood commits 900 abortions every day in this country. That's 900 little boys and girls killed by abortion by Planned Parenthood every day. So the fact that they asked Judge Orrick for the injunction, the fact that Planned Parenthood and National Abortion Federation so badly want these tapes to be kept quiet, shows us that they're very afraid of what's on these tapes. The callous laughter about the abortion procedure, about tearing apart a child's legs, taking the legs off from the navel when they're delivering the child, that discussion by Planned Parenthood abortionists on the tapes, their discussion of the head getting stuck in the cervix and complaining about the abortion procedure. I mean, horrific, so difficult to hear. But this is exactly what the public should hear, Tucker, because Planned Parenthood, the very abortionists that are laughing about what they're doing on these tapes, are receiving $500 million every single year from taxpayers.
So, I mean, this is very far from the soothing rhetoric of choice and, you know, your body and all that stuff. I mean, these are people who are acknowledging what they're doing, which is taking human life. So, but here's my question. Because no one can test, from what I could tell, that these tapes are real, how in the world and in what country could a judge unilaterally decide you're not allowed to show them and, in effect, prevent us from showing them tonight? How could Judge William Orrick do that and get away with it?
Well, it appears, too, that it's not just, you know, you're not the only one not showing it, Tucker, but YouTube took it down over the weekend. Twitter just yesterday sent me a notice. We had it up on my feed, on my Twitter feed, and they took it down. It appears that social media companies as well are fulfilling the order. I mean, this just goes to show that there's a chilling effect right now on journalism that is the opposing viewpoint on abortion. If you don't agree with abortion, if you want to expose what abortion is and actually use their own words of abortionists, then you are going to have to tangle with courts. You're going to have to tangle with attorneys general, like in California, what David's tangling with. You're going to have to tangle with social media executives who don't want your stuff on channels, on YouTube, on Twitter.
Is there, I mean, if there was, and I'm not advocating for this because I don't think I can in my role as this host of the show, but I mean, if there was ever a time for civil disobedience, it seems like some might think this would be the time, because you have an absolute right to say what you think is true and to present evidence that it's true. Is there any place for people who are interested to find these videos?
Right now, I mean, again, it was just taken down off of my Twitter feed. We had put it up after it was released last week. Keep in mind, this is on the public record. So this was put on the public record when Attorney General Becerra in California decided to prosecute David Daleiden and Sandra Merritt at CMP. And so the tapes were entered into the public record in the court. So the public deserves to see this. This is a live prosecution happening in California. The public deserves to know. This is a corporation. Planned Parenthood is a corporation, and they're the ones on many of these tapes that's receiving $500 million taxpayer dollars every year. They're claiming to do it in the name of women's health, and yet their own latest annual report, which just came out this weekend, shows that their cancer screenings are declining, prenatal care was cut in half, their abortion numbers are going up, their taxpayer money is going up. Taxpayers deserve to know this, and the whole country deserves to know this. They deserve to know what abortionists actually are saying.
That's exactly right. What it really looks like. Don't avert your gaze. Face it. Lila,
exactly.
thank you.
Thank you, Tucker.
Tiger Woods just got arrested, which is bad enough, but now ESPN is accused of photoshopping his mugshot. Did they do that? Why'd they do that? Is that the weirdest story of the day? Our Top That panel up next.